Thank you for joining us today to talk about how IFS Energy and Resources workflow can help you process invoices. I am Brandy Grigg, a product manager here at IFS, and I'm joined today by Deborah Bryson, a solutions architect. In her former life, Deborah was a revenue and market accounting manager responsible for generating transportation, gathering, and marketing invoices used for estimates, accruals, and actualization to be paid to or paid by third parties. And we are delighted to be here with you today. Accounts payable is one of the most important jobs in our industry, in every industry. Without paying our bills, we can't run a company. With that said, there are three main problems we think about when it comes to AP invoicing. The first being how time-consuming it is. It takes a lot of time to enter in, approve, and save off your invoices. The second problem I hear when it comes to AP invoicing is that it's error-prone, creating a lot of mistakes, some that are only caught after JIB has been processed, leading to reverse rebooks. Lastly, I often hear how manual the entire process is, from data entry to seeking approvals and scanning invoices. Now, these are just the three that I'm hearing. When you think of AP invoicing, are there any other issues you're challenged with in this process? Well, here at IFS, we decided to help ease those pains using IFS Energy and Resources workflow tied in with Bolo and Excalibur. Workflow is a business process management tool that will take your current process and kick them up a notch using automation. Today, we're going to see how automation with IFS Workflow can help streamline your AP invoice processing. But that is not the only use for this powerful tool. Workflow reduces unnecessary complexities to enhance your processes to work for you instead of against you. Things like approvals, easy data entry with upfront data validations, integration with IFS and third-party products will all decrease the time spent on each and every task. This is where Workflow shines, providing all this and more to ensure your office runs as smoothly as possible. We are about to take a look at the AP invoice workflow and how data is validated upon entry. It's also a great example of a multi-tiered approval process. AP invoices are abundant. It's one of the highest volume processes we have today. But by streamlining the entry, one can shave minutes off each invoice. And since it's an easily configurable tool, I know this will work for you as well. Let's go ahead and dive in. This is the home screen of Workflow. Well, I will start my process to get my invoice approved and paid. I will simply double-click the workflow I want to start and allow the screen to open up. This screen, while it looks like a normal data entry screen, is actually quite powerful. We have 4 fields: vendor, GL account, cost center, and AFE that pull in live from Bolo or Excalibur. I will enter in my invoice details starting with the vendor, followed by the invoice number and the invoice date. The screen is both mouse and keyboard friendly, meaning whomever is entering the data will be comfortable doing so based on their normal routine. Let me finish entering my data. I will enter in my GL account. I will simply tab into my cost center. An AFE for today's demo, and I will enter in my amount, as well as my activity date. Once I've entered all my data, I'm going to hit this check validation button, and this is where all the validations are taking place. We are validating numerous things, including if the GL account is AFE required or not, if the cost type of the cost center is associated with the GL account, if the AFE is associated with the cost center and GL account, and if I have entered in a duplicate invoice number. If I enter in an AFE and one is not required on the GL account, Workflow will simply remove the AFE for me. On the flip side, if I do not enter in an AFE and the GL account requires it, I will not be able to submit this invoice for approval until the AFE is entered. On top of that, it's also reviewing our activity date, ensuring that it is not a date greater than the invoice date and no more than 2 years in the past, which is configurable, to ensure that I don't accidentally enter in the year 223 instead of 2023. So no matter who is filling out this form, if it's the field or the back office, we ensure all data is valid in the financial system. So when we integrate the invoice detail to the financial system, there are no errors now or later. Right now, this workflow routes based off invoice type. However, we can customize that to route off anything, including amount, AFE, or cost center. If I look at the process map, which defines where all the routing takes place, I see a lot of lines. That's because we have multiple ways that invoices can be approved, including G&A, workover, and non-workover invoices. Workover invoices require 3 approvals, 1, 2, 3, while non-workover require 2, and G&A only requires 1. For today's purposes, I'm going to say this is a G&A invoice so that we need only sit through 1 approval. Once I've got my data entered, I can enter in any comments that would be relevant to an approver and a copy of my invoice. And then I will hit the submit button to send it for approval. It tells me who the next approver is. Normally, this would go to someone else, but since I am doing the demo today, it was easier to keep it all in my inbox. As an approver, I now have a new case in my inbox. As we can see right here, we've got our vendor and our invoice number, and I need only double-click to see the details. I could also be approving directly from my email or mobile device without having to sit at a computer or log into IFS Workflow. Once I open the screen, I see everything is grayed out or locked down, and I am unable to change the data. If something should need to be changed, I would be sending it back to the original data entry. The screen is also configurable, so if you would like approvers to be able to assign or change, say, GL accounts, we could open that field up, allow for those updates, and have the approver once again hit the check validation button to ensure what was entered is still good data for our accounting system. I can download and review a copy of the invoice, as well as see any comments that were sent my way. Once I have confirmed that yes, this invoice is ready to be paid, I can approve it via this radio button. Once I approve it, it will integrate to the financial system, in this case Bolo, as a posted invoice, ready for payment. And our document will be saved to my predefined location, where all my organization's documents are stored, removing the need to save it manually or have it be in a system all its own. We can see the case is no longer in my inbox, but if I look at my participated, I can see the status is completed, which tells me this invoice integrated with no issues to IFS Bolo. And from here, I will hand it over to Deborah Bryson to continue to follow this invoice on its journey to payment.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandy. Let me share my screen, and this might take a moment, but let's jump over to the accounting system. This is the accounting system. This is Bolo Accounting. The screen you're looking at is our welcome page or the beginning of the dashboard, and the data that you're looking at are really defaults to say, when you're entering the system on a daily basis, what is the accounting period? What company are you as a user looking at? The other items you're seeing on this welcome page are all of the menu items that are available for Bolo. Within our online documentation, you can find a visual workflow diagram for every business process. But let's talk about the integration with workflow today. What we have created was an invoice that came from workflow. Normally, when you're in Bolo to create an AP voucher or an AP invoice, you would need to follow all of these steps in order to create the actual invoice. With the workflow product, we're eliminating all of these steps 100%. The data has been entered into workflow, so there's no data entry required. There's no upload required. It was managed electronically through an automated interface that we have. There's no additional validation. So it is not like you're creating data into workflow and then you need to revalidate or check the data again in Bolo. As Brandy mentioned, all of the data items that you can select, like the vendor and the cost center and the AFE, the GL accounts, the validation has already been pre-reviewed within P Workflow, and you wouldn't have been able to enter a transaction if it were an invalid cost center. You can't enter an invalid AFE. So that pre-validation has already occurred. So you don't need to check that again in Bolo because you would not have been able to create the transaction to begin with. The other advantage we have with the workflow tool is that the approval has already occurred. Within Workflow, you can have a single approval or a multi-tier approval. So with Bolo accounting, you're not forced to go into accounts payable, redo, reevaluate, re-enter any transactions. Everything that you're going to need for processing payments has already been pre-validated and pre-approved. So we can eliminate this step. We can eliminate that full menu, and we can go into what we call our favorites. So with our favorites, this is more of a streamlined data entry tool, review tool. And let's follow through with the steps that we have with the workflow. So I'm going to close this welcome page, and we're going to actually open through our favorites menu, the data entry screen that was used to capture the actual invoice that came from the workflow. Now notice I'm not entering any data. I'm literally just selecting the specific transaction that came from the workflow. So as you'll see here, I'm looking for my cursor. I have a vendor, and I'm selecting the most current invoice that came over from the workflow for that vendor. And here's the transaction. It's already posted. So we're with the pre-validation that occurred within the workflow, we confirmed that the accounting period was open, that it was a valid vendor, that we didn't have a duplicate invoice. The transaction is posted, meaning that I'm accounting for both the payable side that is going to go to my vendor, as well as the receivable side, which will allow me to bill my joint interest billing partners. The DAC that I'm going to bill my partners for is represented here. And like with any Bolo application, anywhere that you see the ellipses will allow me to navigate to that particular data entry screen and look at the data that supports that data entry screen. And here's the billing partners that I have that I'm billing for their share of that charge. So the cost center is pre-validated. The JIB which was defined within Bolo, is pre-validated. The billing partners on the JIB were pre-validated. I really only had to capture from my from the workflow what was the cost center, what was the AFE if I had a project associated with my GL account. Workflow provided the GL account, so I'm simply reviewing the data that came from workflow. I'm going to actually pay my vendor this $556. For 1099 reporting, all of the accounts payable transactions flow to the Bolo accounting 1099 module for both miscellaneous and NEC reports. So again, there's no new data entry, there's no upload, no additional validation. I can, if I want to, simply review this data. But with the workflow, I'm not required to review because, like I said, this transaction is already posted. What I could do is simply proceed to the downstream processes within Bolo that allow me to account for this transaction. One of the items that we have with our integration with workflow is we're able to review the data that came from the workflow. Again, we don't have to re-enter the data, we don't have to validate the data, and we don't have to approve the data, because as you can see, this particular transaction is posted, which means it's ready to follow through with all of the downstream processing that we have within Bolo. Now, those downstream processes include 3 options. I can pay my vendor. That's option number one, and that's what we will do next. I can allocate the cost to my JIB partners, and I can allocate the JIB cost to wells that represent the cost centers associated with my billing transactions. And then from a well level, I can then allocate to bill my billing partners. So I can pay an owner, I can allocate my cost to wells, and then I can allocate the cost at a well level to my billing partners. So let's go to the next step. I have my accounts payable journal entry, which is posted. But let's go to the first downstream process. And on a day-to-day basis, this really would be the first step you would need to do when you have workflow enabled. There's no reason to review transactions that are already posted. So you can skip all of the steps that we saw with our workflow menu items and go directly to our payment module. Now, this is our recommended payment screen. So as a user, I can look at these specific items and identify which ones that I want to be paid in this time frame. So this is telling me that the next time you run checks is going to be at the end of May, could have been at the end of June. And I'm going to select the item that we just received from the workflow. So this is my vendor. Their check was for $556. So literally, this is the only screen that you're going to need to go to within Bolo Accounting in order to make a payment. You can decide that you want to pay that $556 in full. There's nothing you need to do. I'm just going to select for payment, and then it's ready for processing. I could put this item on hold, meaning there's a business reason you don't want to pay in this particular time frame. Maybe there's an item you want to clear up with your vendor. Maybe you had the wrong address, but you can hold that item for any period of time that makes sense for your business practices. The other thing is that you could pay it in part. They may have billed you for $556, but from an accounting perspective, you feel like you only owe $456. So you can make a partial payment of that $456 and then contact the vendor in the future to negotiate whatever that $100 difference was. In this case, I'm going to leave the payment record as to be paid. I'm going to select it for payment. And now I'm going to look at my payment report. This is going to generate a report that tells me right away which vendors I'm going to pay in my next business cycle. And you can see right here, that first line item. This is the vendor amount. This is the item that was going to be paid. And our next check cycle, my Amoco production company is going to get that $556. So as you can see from looking at our workflow, this would be a very simple business process. We receive the detail from the workflow. You have the option of reviewing the detail. That really isn't required. What is required is you need to select the payment, and then you need to make the payment. So once the AP transactions from workflow are in the accounting system, there's 3 steps: review, select, and pay. And as you can see from looking at this screen with the ability to simply click the button, select for payment, it really is a very straightforward business process. And we really hope this helps for you to see how the integration with the workflow. I'm going to jump back over here to see my menu. We have virtually eliminated almost 15 business steps with your accounts payable workflow that you no longer have to do. You simply have to integrate the transaction into the workflow into Bolo, which is the review step, select for payment, and then make the payment. With that, I'm going to hand this back over to Brandy. Brandy?
Thank you, Deborah. Now that we've seen how an invoice can be entered through to payment, let's focus on other ways IFS Workflow can help you manage not just AP, but any task. IFS Workflow comes with many capabilities to complement the automation. Reports can be used to slice and dice your case data in any way you need. They are custom built, exportable to PDF or Excel, and can provide any detail captured within a flow. Notifications are always automated and can be placed strategically to let someone know when a task can be assigned to them, or even if tasks are getting stale. IFS Workflow is mobile friendly, meaning you can run it on a tablet or a phone to keep things flowing forward, even while on the move. Approvals are fully configurable based on your needs and processes. The real-time end-to-end processing means, well, exactly that, including our integration with Bolo, as you just saw, and Excalibur. We retrieve information out of and place records into the accounting systems real time with no delays. Workflow uses a group security model and works in conjunction with a security protocol for the integrations to keep the integrated data safe from bad actors. Visibility is into your overall process to find and create efficiencies, but also all the way down to where a task is during its life cycle. Any documents uploaded or created in Workflow will remain in the system, and we can integrate with your current document repository to keep all your organization's content in one central location. Dashboards and KPIs provide added visibility in charts. They are easily configurable so that each person can see what they care about. And of course, the tool is fully customizable. Whether it's the AP invoice approval routing or another workflow, your process is our process, just with automation. Workflows we have already built are listed here on the screen. Today we looked at AP invoice approval, allowing me to show you in a meaningful way the power of this tool. We have some other really helpful stuff here on this list I just want to take a moment to highlight. The Midcap New Well workflow is a process to house all your pre-well turn new well details, including things such as geology of the well, the JOA information, lessor, and much more. Manual journal entry automation does, well, just that. It automates the approval and processing of manual journal entries, while payout works with P2 reporting to serve up when a payout is being reached, instead of having to be sought out. IFS Workflow can integrate with any IFS product and third-party product to bring you a fully encompassed flow that brings all the data you need to succeed in one place. So in summation, AP invoicing is part of the business, but it doesn't have to be a painful part. You can streamline your invoice entry, invoice approvals, and integration with your financial system all from one screen. The tool is flexible to meet your approval hierarchy requirements, route your documents, and validate your data, making it a time-saving tool that will provide endless benefits. No matter your system or your process, Workflow is a solution that will save you time through streamlined data entry, upfront data validations, and customizable everything. What we saw today was just one way this flow can be configured. I would love the chance to kick your process, any process, up a notch and have you benefit from the time savings, validated data, and smooth integration. Thank you for your time today. Please do not hesitate to reach out to myself, Deborah, or your account executive for more information regarding IFS Energy and Resources Workflow.